Good evening, Holliston. Welcome to the Select Board's October 5th, 2020 meeting. Maybe some of you wonder what we talk about before the camera goes on. This evening was all about Chief Cassidy's haircut. So it was a lively conversation. It hopefully puts us in the right frame of mind tonight as we approach a rather busy agenda. To start our agenda, we will be welcoming our town clerk, Elizabeth Greendale, to talk to us about the November election and all things concerning it. Liz, are you with us?
I am here.
Liz, the floor is yours. I think you understand through speaking with Ben that the board and the citizens would be well served by an update from you tonight on what's going on. Maybe you can talk about the early voting, the process for the November election, and anything else going on in your office.
Yes, I'm happy to have the opportunity. Thank you for this. And everyone has been waiting for their ballots, and I've gotten a lot of emails and phone calls, and excuse me, they arrived late Friday afternoon, so we've had a team of people in stuffing ballots. We have almost 5,800 to date, and they're coming in, the applications are coming in daily. So that aside, we still have 3 options for people to vote. So they can vote in person on election day, just like they normally do. And that's at the high school, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. and typical, but we've taken some precautions. And I don't know if people haven't been to the polls since COVID, but we have everything spaced out. We have separate entrance and exits. We're cleaning the surfaces frequently. So I just want to put people's mind at ease that they can feel confident that, there is some social distancing going on at the high school, and we are taking precautions. So that is one way that people can vote. Another is voting by mail, which we are, like I said, we've gotten a lot of applications. We are at, like I said, 50, almost 5,800, and we're at, that's almost 40, that's 45% of our registered voters right now. So that's a lot, and we still have a ways to go. With that, like I said, we just started stuffing ballots today, and returning your ballots. People were concerned about whether they want to put it in the U.S. Post or they can drop it off at Town Hall. We do have a nice new official ballot drop box right on the side of the building, and it is monitored with a camera, and it's locked, of course, and we will be emptying that frequently throughout the day. So I think people can feel confident about dropping it there. And I believe they can still drop it in the mail too. Let's see. I want to go over the process a little bit. So once the ballots are returned back to us, we log them into the state computer system, and then we file them in precinct and street order, and they're stored in a vault in Town Hall. So they're very secure. There's a lot of safety precautions that we go through to make people feel comfortable. And one of the biggest things that I want to point out is that people can go to Track My Ballot, and that information is on our website. On the front page, you can look at the important information for 2020 elections, and there's a link there. So it brings you right to the Secretary of State's website, and you can track the status of your ballot. So you can see most people's right now say pending because we have their application, but we haven't had the ballots to mail them out yet. As I said, we're mailing them out this week. Hopefully we'll get them all done. And then you can actually look and see the date that it was mailed. And then you can see the date that we got it back. So you can be confident that your ballot is going to be counted because you can track it. And then the third option is early voting in person, and that begins October 17th. That's going to be in Upper Town Hall. Again, very socially distant. I got some great compliments when we were doing it for the primary that people felt comfortable, and because they wanted to come in person but didn't want to go to the polls on election day. So that made people feel good. We are going to be doing that for 2 straight weeks. That's October 17th through the 30th. During the week, it's normal business hours, And on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, both weekends, we're doing it 9 to 1. So we'll be there. And again, same safety precautions as far as COVID goes, and the same restrictions as far as how we handle the ballots. And I think that's about it. We want people to feel safe in voting, and we want everybody to be comfortable. And if they have any questions, you can always call the office. We're happy to do that. We would like people to stick to a method, so make your decision how you want to vote and how you want to feel comfortable, and then kind of stick to it if you can. And also, don't wait to drop off your ballot to the last minute, or don't wait to mail it the last minute. As soon as you get it, if you're doing it by mail, just vote on it and turn it around and drop it in the mail or drop it in the mailbox, the drop box, I mean, because that gives us plenty of time to process. And it is cumbersome what we do. I mean, we handle those ballots 7 or 8 times in order to maintain the protocol that we have. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Liz. I think we might have a couple. We'll start with Ben Sparrow.
Well, I think all I just really want to say is thank you, and I know this is a big task, and we really appreciate all the hard work that you and your team put into this for every election, and this election seems to be particularly exciting for a lot of people, so there's a lot of interest and a lot of people casting ballots. So thank you, and good luck, and let us know if we can support you in any other way. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, Tina.
My only question, well, two. One, people are required to wear masks when they come in to vote, either early or at Holliston High School on the election day itself? Masks
Yes.
are required. Are people required to make appointments, or they walk into Town Hall Monday through Friday for early voting?
They can walk in. It's
Okay.
going to be open, and we're going to be closing the doors so that to protect the people in Town Hall,
Okay,
the staff.
okay, thank you.
Liz, just a couple of questions. During the primary that we just went through, what percentage of the eligible voters in Holliston took advantage of the mail-in voting option?
Of the voters, I would say 70%.
70%. That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Now, processing,
It is.
and I think, so people understand, the mail-in vote, or ballot, I should say, is handled by your office. It's secured until Election Day. Those ballots are opened by your staff only on Election Day. Is that correct?
Right now, yes. There is a provision in the law that we can do early opening, or we can even do early tabulation. I have yet to decide on that. I'm leaning against it because I have great people at the polls, and they're pretty efficient, and we got it all done last time. So I'm still thinking about that.
What percentage of the eligible voters overall voted during the primaries? Do you remember?
Yeah, we had 40. I think we had 42%, which was huge for primary. Our big numbers are like 17%
Right.
in a state primary. So it was really it was a big turnout statewide, and I think the mail-in ballots probably had something to do with
No
that.
question. So usually in a presidential election every 4 years, we see that's when Holliston comes out to vote. If I'm not mistaken, it's usually 80 to 90% of eligible voters vote. Is that correct?
Yes, it is correct.
So you're going to see quite a lot
I'm
of
90, but
right.
I think
But I was going to say, so in other words, the proof of concept that you went through during the primary is likely to be doubled, if not more burden on your staff on that election day. Do you expect any delays associated with counting that many ballots, and should we set some voter expectation of what the Holliston returns will look like?
we're going to be there that night until we're done. So however long that takes, if we have to process ballots until 9 o'clock, because we haven't had a chance to do it throughout the day to finish, we will do it. Or 10 o'clock, however long that takes, we will do whatever we have on hand. We would be counting ballots after the fact, because ballots can be accepted with a postmark of the 3rd, but we can receive them until 5 o'clock on the 6th. So, excuse me. So I'm going to schedule accounting on that following Monday, which what is that, the 9th, I think. Because in Massachusetts, we don't have to have all of our numbers in and our elections finalized until the 13th. But people will know the results in Massachusetts before that.
Liz, just following through on sort of the secure process of the mail-in ballots, can you assure the voters that the mail-in ballots will be secured, that you have enough room in the vault to handle that many ballots?
I don't in my vault, but the treasurer has room in her vault, which is downstairs. So daily we'll be putting our ballots in because we need to use every box that we store them in because we're filing every day. We're interfiling. So we are going to be pulling them out, in and out every day. And they're both secured at night. They're all secured at night, but we'll be using 2 vaults.
Okay. I think that's all I have for questions, Liz. You guys have a gargantuan effort ahead of you, a lot of physical manual work. I know you've been in touch with Chief Cassidy about exploring additional resources to help you get through this time. I think the voters in Holliston should rest assured that in our time there have been no problems. The elections are run exceptionally well. I happened to observe it a couple of times. You got a great team too. I mean, the volunteers that show up it's a well-oiled machine, and I think that contributes to some of the quality of the work you do. So unless anybody on the Zoom call has any other questions for the town clerk, anybody want to weigh in? Hang on 1 second, Liz. We'll see if anybody puts their hand up. Okay, Liz, I think that's it. You've obviously answered every single question possibly. So thanks for joining us tonight. It's always great to see you. Get your rest because you're going to need it. Be well. Good night.
That's for sure. Okay, thank you. Good night.
All right, take care.
Thank you, Liz.
Bye-bye.
All right, moving on with our agenda, we will now bring up Chief Cassidy for a coronavirus.
Before we do that, I think we have a warrant for the election.
Yep, we'll sign that now if you'd like.
Do we have to have a motion?
Yeah, it would be a motion to approve that warrant.
Okay.
So that's not item 5, the warrants.
No, it's, I thought item,
We have it under warrant for November election, under number 1, so we might as well vote it
Very
now
good.
if you don't mind.
Very good. Do you want to read the summary of that, Ben?
sure. So this reads, I'll just read the top part here. I don't need to read the whole thing. To the constables of the town of Holliston, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth, you are hereby required to notify and warn the inhabitants of said city or town who are qualified to vote in elections to vote at precincts 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the Holliston High School, 370 Hollis Street, on Tuesday, the 3rd day of November, 2020, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the following purpose: to cast their votes in the state election for the candidates for the following offices. And want me to read them out?
Let's see. What's it look like? Yeah, read them out.
7 of them.
Yep.
Electors of President and Vice President of the United States, Senator in Congress for this Commonwealth, Representative in Congress for the 5th District, Counselor for the 2nd District, Senator in General Court for 2nd Middlesex and Norfolk District, Representative in General Court for the 8th Middlesex District, and Register of Probate for Middlesex County.
Excellent. Is there any other relevant information there, Mr. Sparrow?
Nope, then we get into questions, so we don't think we need to.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the warrant for the November election as read by the clerk.
So moved.
And I second.
Motion as a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That passes. Thanks for bringing that up, Ben.
Sure.
Appreciate that. Now, it's Chief Cassidy time. Good evening, Chief. Welcome.
Good evening.
How's everything going?
Things are going quite well, thank you.
Great to hear.
I am pleased to report that as of this evening, we have had no new cases reported to us since Wednesday, keeping our local total at 95, with 77 recovered and 2 COVID-related fatalities. That brings our active cases to 16. Of those 16 active cases, 12 are associated with a long-term care facility, 2 are at an elderly housing complex, 1 is at a multifamily dwelling, and 1 is at a single-family home. We are hoping that some of the cases at the long-term care facility that were first reported on September 16th will soon be rolling off of that active list and moving to the recovered category. Mobile testing was conducted at the elderly housing complex on Friday, 75% participation rate of the residents, and that was a great turnout for voluntary testing with only essentially a day's notice. The results have not come back yet, but we are certainly eager to see those results. I would note that as of last week, there's a discrepancy between our local numbers and the Department of Public Health numbers by a factor of 5 cases. So our list of new cases for the 14-day period ending October 3rd was 7. And depending on when those came into the Maven system, the ones that DPH has that we don't have note of could determine our risk designation this Wednesday evening. So we are on bated breath to see what the color designation will be Wednesday at 6 p.m. And that is it that I have for my just general overview.
Any questions, Ben?
Do we have any idea what's going on with those 5 cases? Are we just sort of in a,
So the explanation on some of the conference calls with the local boards of health when the DPH is asked, how come there's a discrepancy between what you're publishing in your weekly report and what I'm seeing on my printout locally, is that cases come on and off a community's roster as more information is available. So early on, we had a couple cases where it was reported to us, and then when the nursing consultant did the contact tracing and did the case management, they discovered that the person used to live in Holliston but has since moved out of town. So it first came onto our numbers, and so that could be why the addresses that I have and that the 2 public safety answering points have may differ, because the nursing consultant may have contacted someone who was listed as having a Holliston address, and they may either be out of state or out of town and therefore not in our community itself.
so those 5 are not necessarily active cases? They could have been cases, they could have just been cases in history that were missed, or could have been...
So we don't have a record of 5 additional active cases in town.
Okay. That's the main thing. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Tina?
Yeah, just you had mentioned, I believe, in other updates before the board in previous weeks, that at the long-term care facility, the staff, it was both residents and staff.
Yes, so my number is only for those that are residing in town. So those would either be patients or staff members who reside in our community.
Okay.
There are 3 additional staff members who do not reside in Holliston.
Okay.
And so, to your question, Mr. Sparrow, that could also be where some of those 5 come from, because the DPH views that as a cluster, and therefore it may be on the case management for our nursing consultant, even if the person lives out of town, because they contracted it or are presumed to have contracted it in Holliston. So that's where some of those numbers sometimes can be a little bit, which report do they go on?
Gotcha. Okay.
And then you've identified previously too that a college student who has a home address of Holliston but is away at school could be tested there and be reported for a period of time at least as residing in Holliston. We know that college campuses are actively testing at a very high level.
Very much so.
Okay, so you're again hoping that 5 cases resolve the discrepancy and
are not in our community.
Yeah, okay. And then
Yes.
you're saying that would bring the number down to 7.
So the ones that we are sure of and that we have addresses for the reporting period of
Yep.
September 20th to October 3rd is a total of 7.
Thank you.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Chief, just a few logistical questions. Earlier, we heard from our town clerk about the election on November 6th. The election, I believe, the polling place will be the high school field house. Can you tell us a little bit about the steps that will be taken after Election Day to prep that area or segregate that area from use by any high school students until it's properly deconned?
Sure. So the understanding with the school district is that the areas that we have access to for voting purposes would be cleaned by their cleaning crew. So that would be the hallway, that would be the field house itself, that would be the restrooms, that would be any side rooms that we might be using for preparation or meals separately, and that would be part of their normal routine in the evening prior to school the next day.
Okay, will it be cleaned before town election as well, deconned, if you will,
Yes,
effectively?
yeah,
Okay.
depending on when the town clerk's crews start to set up, because the cleaning happens in the afternoon and in the evening, so there may be some overlap between when the town clerk and her crew are starting to set up versus when that's already been hit by the cleaners.
Got it. Recently, we understood that there was a case involving an employee who was positive at the Adams Middle School.
Yes.
Subsequently, school was closed there today and tomorrow. Can you talk a little bit about steps to decontaminate that space to the best of your knowledge and the readiness for it to reopen, I believe, on Wednesday?
Correct. So had some conversations with my colleagues in the school and public health over the weekend. The staff member at the school received their positive test on Saturday and notified supervisor, and they spoke with their school nurse. And so in accordance with the safety plan that was approved for the staff, as well as the reopening plan that was submitted to DESE, they went in and did a deep clean of the areas where this staff member would have been frequenting. So basically they backtrack any of the areas where this individual would be. For example, the area where this teacher is very different from the section of the building that's being used by the Montessori students elsewhere. So they didn't scrub the entire building just because there was a specific work area. So the way the instruction is taking place at the Adams School right now, they have co-teachers that move from classroom to classroom and are working from a cart. So the students remain fixed and the instructors move. So they knew the areas where this instructor would have been, so it would be specific rooms and then break rooms, restrooms, the entry door that they would use, all of the normal stuff. But so there's a discrete part of the building that they can focus their cleaning on.
Okay. Does that include fogging?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they've got a fogger available for every building.
Great. My last question emanates from your message to us. I think folks at home know you give us a weekly update. It's very well done. Gives us the activity report of what's going on. And you indicated there was one of the many calls that you're on a weekly basis was with the White House. Dr. Fauci and others were telling local officials about the upcoming vaccine sequence. I believe the doctor encouraged local emergency management officials and other boards of health to encourage populations to embrace the pending vaccine and to encourage folks to get it when it's available. One of the things I just wanted to, I know it's early, the vaccine is not right in front of us right now, but has there been any discussion about how that will be deployed?
Yes.
And can you give us a hint of what they're thinking about?
Sure.
Either through personnel, deployment, locations, cost, etc.
Yep. So the intention is to prioritize the distribution in 4 different phases. The first phase, which they're calling the jumpstart phase, includes high-risk workers in healthcare and first responders, and then also people of all ages with underlying conditions and older adults who live in congregate or overcrowded settings. The second phase would be critical risk workers, teachers and school staff, people of all ages with underlying conditions, older adults not included in phase 1, people in homeless shelters, and individuals in prisons, jails, and detention centers. Phase 3 would be young adults, children, and workers in essential areas to the functioning of society, and phase 4 would be everybody else. So part of Operation Warp Speed, which is the public-private partnership that's being used to try and get a vaccine to the consumer, it's been going on for months. And the risk right now is largely on the backs of the pharmaceutical companies. And they are producing their vaccines right now concurrently with the trials that are taking place. And as they have their trials, if they continue to move on to the next stage and are able to move towards the approval process, then everything that they've been producing may end up being put in the hands of healthcare providers and pharmacies and places where the distribution would be taking place. If there's a problem during the trials, then everything that they've produced, depending on the nature of the problem, that entire product line may get thrown away. So they're assuming all of the risk right now. So the intention would be that it would be made available through the normal supply chains to pharmacies, to healthcare providers, and these would be the priorities for who would be able to get it, because it's not all going to be available all at once, and so they're going to need to prioritize who receives them.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Fauci mentioned in your message that we want to encourage folks to get vaccinated. This is ultimately the way to achieve some new norm. That seems to indicate that the vaccine would not be mandatory for any subset of the groups you just mentioned. Is that the understanding you have?
That is correct.
Okay.
And the other thing to understand is that because this is a new vaccine for a novel coronavirus that we still don't know a lot about, it is likely that it will not be a one and done, that it will be after your first administration. In 3 to 4 weeks, you may need to receive a second shot. So it would not be all encompassed in just one administration.
Got it. Okay.
But the reason that Dr. Fauci was encouraging us to really be pushing this in the community is because there already are people who are leery of vaccines to begin with. And then there are also going to be those who normally would be pro-vaccine but are concerned that this was being rushed to market much faster than the normal approval process. And although what's going on in the United States is just a microcosm of what's going on around the globe, there are, the WHO is...
World Health Organization.
Correct.
Not the rock group.
Correct.
Or doctor.
Thank you.
Is supporting development of vaccines all around the globe.
Did you see how she just tarted right into that conversation?
Well played. And they, here in the United States, the government has committed $10 billion towards this effort, and the military is very much involved and would likely be involved in the distribution of some of these things, just like in the past you've seen the National Guard do logistics and deployment of equipment. They might be part of the logistics and delivery chain.
Okay.
So, it's a great public-private partnership, but we realize that there are some people that are just leery to begin with of vaccines, but then the fact that something that wasn't even dreamed up 10 months ago is now potentially within 3 to 4 months might be available, there are going to be some people that are going to have some hesitation.
Now, it's months away.
Yes.
Easily. What's the most optimistic scenario that they're sharing with you, or are they sharing with you at this time?
They realistically are saying not in calendar year 2020, that it's much more likely within 2021.
Okay. I think I said November 6th for the election. I was wrong. It's
3rd.
Thank you. Any other questions for Chief Cassidy on this pipe?
I have two, and I don't want to be Darlak and forget them, so.
Keeps going, Mike.
You mentioned an instructor when you were talking about the schools. I think you were using that as an example as to how they control the movement of people within the building. What was released to the community did not identify who the staff member was. I think I just wanted to point out to everyone listening that you were just using that as an example.
That's correct.
As to how the schools are approaching.
Yes, it is a staff member.
Right, correct. And then I wanted to back up to our designation, our color designation as a community in the state of Massachusetts, and today being the day that step 2 of phase 3 was allowed for communities that were not in the red. It did seem like that impacted Holliston somewhat, in that I kind of wanted to know your impression on whether or not the school auditorium and upper town hall would be considered indoor performance venues or no. And then also point out that I do believe we have some stores that have fitting rooms that are still not able to use them. So to the extent,
as well as other venues such as the Historical Society, which is still limited to only 50 people outdoors.
Right. So to the extent that we do have indoor and outdoor performance venues, and to the extent that we do have businesses with fitting rooms, really just send the message to the community again. I want to send the message to the community again that we need to do everything that we possibly can to remain vigilant with the safety protocols, wearing our masks, keeping ourselves socially distant from one another, and washing our hands, and limiting our exposures to large groups of people, so that we can come out of the red and we can move forward, and we can open up as a community the way other towns and cities are able to do.
To our advantage right now, Upper Town Hall is not being used for performances, and the schools are currently closed outside groups, so they also are not performance venues, but they have the potential to be, so I agree. And fitting rooms is a very limited niche of our community that is still stuck at step one.
Mm-hmm.
Ben, any follow-ups?
No, not on this piece.
All right. Chief, let's move on to the Karazhak programmatic update.
We have 2 requests for funding that have come through me, that have been vetted, and they are ones that come under the jurisdiction of this board, so yours would be the only one that would need to do the voting. The first one is for a temporary crossing guard for the Holliston Police Department. This was the culmination of a meeting between several interested stakeholders, including Member Hine, and the schools and the police. I was supposed to be at the meeting, but was tied up at another meeting. And this would be for the section, the crosswalk right by the Placentino Miller School that recently, through the Signs and Lines project, is linked to the Upper Charles River Trail, the rail trail. And this would be a pilot program from mid-October through the end of December, and based on the 22.5 hours per week and the rate that is approved for a starting crossing guard, the request would be for $4,256.80, which includes also uniforms for the individual.
Any questions on that, Ben?
You said 22 hours?
22.5 hours per week.
Okay. What happens after December 31st? Do we evaluate whether or not we want to continue the program?
Correct. We would evaluate how much it was being used during that program, and whether or not the colder weather started to impact the utilization, and then to evaluate whether or not it could be absorbed in another budget, or if it was a beta that we chose to learn from, but not to necessarily continue into the future.
Okay. Thank you.
I am fully in support of this. I just want to point out that in the discussion that led to this request came the awareness that snow and ice on the rail trail will be problematic given the extent to which families are opting to have their children walk or bike to school. So if we are still very much in the midst of the pandemic in terms of limited use of transportation, it may be something that this board with Parks and Rec, with whomever, with the Rail Trail Committee, with DPW, I'm throwing everybody in on this who could possibly have a say in how to potentially keep the trail open if the town felt that that was a priority, if the schools felt that that was a priority. It is my understanding that many more families are having their children walk and bike to school, and that is in part why we are here with this crossing guard request, because this new crosswalk is getting heavy traffic, which is wonderful. If we still have the conditions of today in terms of the need to have children not on buses in December and January and February, it may be something that we want to proactively consider. But I just put that out there for a future consideration. Backing up, I'm fully in support of the request. Thank you for bringing it to the board.
Absolutely.
All right. I'll entertain a motion to approve the school crossing guard item as expressed by Chief Cassidy.
Move to approve the request for $4,256.80 for a crossing guard effective as soon as possible through December 30th of 2020 through the CARES Act.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
Great, thank you. And the second request, and I would note that both of these as temper are subject to the 25-75 split, so it would be 25% CARES, 75% FEMA. So the second request comes from our facilities manager, and this is for a replacement door at the public library. The issue is, right now, they're doing their outside distribution through a tent that is not all weather and will not be sufficient to protect the items which are being loaned throughout all weather, and therefore they need to use a door on the lower level of the library that they have not previously been using, and it is in very tough shape. So the quote that the facilities manager got is for the removal of an old hollow metal door and dispose of it, and to install a new commercial aluminum door and frame with a panic bar and a new overhead closer. And that amount is $4,408.
Mr. Sparrow, any questions?
Nope.
Ms. Heine?
None?
I'll entertain a motion to approve the $4,408 quote for a new door at the library to accommodate access during the COVID period of time.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries.
Great, and I would note that on the conference call that I was on the other afternoon regarding round 2 of the CARES Act, which was put on by the MMA, the folks from A&F did clarify they have a few additional categories that we can put expenses in. So these categories will likely sound familiar to a lot of ones that we've already approved, and we can just, there's going to be a new subcategory in which we can track them moving forward. But those include social distancing measures in public buildings, such as plexiglass barriers, stanchions, and small building modifications. So what we just described here with this door under round 2 of the CARES Act would be a specific category of the social distancing measures. Legal fees related to COVID-19, unemployment claims related to COVID-19. Yes, we were very excited to hear that one, and I'm delighted that I can report, especially in light of the conversation we had earlier with the clerk, election expenses, costs beyond the budgeted amount to hold elections, is an approved in round 2. So for our tracking for quarter 2 as well as for quarter 3, those will be 4 new categories into which we can place eligible expenses that we've been tracking since March.
Chief, can I interrupt for 1 second? Did I hear you correctly that the crossing guard is $25.75 with FEMA?
Yes,
Okay. Both of these were.
correct.
Ben, any follow-up questions for the chief on the CARES Act programmatic updates?
Yes, I have. So, Chief, just one thing about what we're doing here. We're talking about using CARES Act money through December 31st.
30th.
30th, excuse me. Have we started conversations or looking into what we would be doing after that time, in January, February, March? I mean, I know there's always the potential that there could be a second round of money coming forward, but there could be certain positions that sunset at this time. At that time, have we started exploring what things we might want to look at for Q3 and Q4 of the fiscal year?
I have not. I think that discussion would probably take place at a larger level and involve members of your board, other
Sure.
committees. So that's why a lot of these positions, whether it's the technology help that we have to moderate all of these remote meetings, or whether it's the temporary crossing guard or the temporary elections help, these are all things that, depending on how long the public health crisis lasts,
Sure.
would either sunset themselves or would continue into the future.
Yeah, because my concern is just that, I know it's early, but I always like to plan ahead. That's just sort of my nature.
I understand.
But also, if we have town meeting in December, we're going to be putting a lot of emphasis on that, and it doesn't give us a lot of runway to
Right.
pivot after that. We're getting in budget season and things like that, and I want to make sure that if there's certain positions that we should be exploring to keep longer than that we're making sure that we keep those on the table. We're thinking about them, and we're starting to put together some ideas on what that might, the scope, and if we need to buy more PPE, or however that's going to look, so that way we can be ready into the future, so we're not caught off guard.
Yeah, no, it's on our radar. We haven't had a comprehensive approach to that, but it's certainly, every time we post a position, we're posting it as temporary.
Right.
And so the individuals that are filling those roles understand it's time limited.
Right.
And funding limited.
Sure. Okay.
I do have one question. You mentioned legal fees that are COVID related.
Yes.
Starting when?
At the beginning of the crisis. So when we had council weigh in on the issue of the number of hours that we needed to vote for our delayed May election,
Yeah.
those were eligible expenses.
How about impact bargaining for the schools?
I would probably need to check with the program coordinator at A&F to see if that would qualify.
Okay.
If the impact bargaining was related to the COVID emergency, yes. If it was impact bargaining related to their open contract, which was up for negotiations, then no.
I'm speaking of the latter.
The latter or the former?
Former. I always practice that in my head, and I always get it wrong. The first one.
Say both.
50-50 chance.
Okay. Will you pursue that conversation?
I can,
Yeah?
absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
I'd like to open up a request for the chief to consider with my colleagues, see if there's some consensus here. Earlier we heard from Liz Greendale about the secure keeping of the ballots until Election Day. She mentioned to us that she secures them in her vault and she'll make use of the treasurer's vault as well. And as you know, it struck me that we did expend some funds from the Karazhak for a ballot box outside. The ballot box also has a camera on it now that came with it from the Karazhak, if I'm not mistaken. Would it make sense to have a similar camera placed on the vaults so that we can monitor the coming and going of people while these ballots are stored in there? In the event there's any concern about ballots gone missing, we'd have a video record of access into the vaults to at least try to determine who may have had access to it. Because as I understand it right now, it's not an electronic access vault.
That's correct.
And monitoring it is currently not available. So
I could check with the technology director. And
before you get that, I just want to find out from my colleagues
Right.
if they're in on the idea.
So the vault generally is open, and people can come and go. I would have thought it was limited and that it was closed,
Not
like
so
a
much
bank
that it's
vault.
open, that you
Okay.
can come and go, but that anyone who comes and goes with access to the vault.
There's no
would be-
recording of
Yeah,
who that is.
you've got
Okay.
access.
Yeah.
You've got a recording of that.
Okay.
Ben, what do you think of that?
I think that would be particularly important for not the clerks, but the second vault that was being used. That personally, I think that would be a little. I'm open to it. I think if it makes sense, we can set it up. I don't think it makes sense.
I don't recall the camera for outside being more than 1,500, if that.
Right, so I would want to check with the technology director because a few years ago, we did make improvements to the camera system inside the building and added a lot of interior cameras. And so I'd be interested to find out if we already have a view of those and they're already being logged on a DVR. But if not, I could actually
If
absolutely.
you could report back on it,
ask him
because it
to.
seems like there's a consensus interest.
Sure.
Just to, again, add a layer of security to the ballots.
Of course, yeah, we want the public to have confidence that they're secure, even
Any
when
concerns with
no
that,
one's
Mr.
in the
Ahern?
building.
Nope, let's
Very good.
discuss it in the next meeting.
Did you know there were cameras all over your new office?
I did.
Okay.
I always wave to them.
Yeah.
There's a website, actually. See Travis work. Mike, is that it?
A webcam.
Before I adjourn, allow you to adjourn, any questions from our participants on the Zoom for Chief Cassidy related to the coronavirus update? Hearing none, Mike?
Okay, great.
Thanks for your participation. Oh, wait a
I have a
minute.
question.
We have a question. Is this Joan?
Hi. Yes, hi, this is Joan. How are you doing?
Not too bad, and yourself?
I'm fine, thank you.
What's on your mind?
This is not my environmental hat on right now. So I realized that the flu clinic had been canceled, of course, because it was, in a big area. I'm wondering, there's a lot of towns that are doing drive-by flu clinics, like Framingham and Franklin and Sudbury, and I'm wondering if Chief Cassidy has had any information about or any thought about doing that for Holliston?
So one of the reasons that the Board of Health opted to cancel the local flu clinic done by the municipality this year is because the guidance from the Department of Public Health requires that all of the information for tracking to whom the shots were administered needs to be entered into the state system by the public health nurse. It cannot be done by support staff. And so the Board of Health in years past has been challenged to get enough nurses who are willing to actually staff the flu clinic, and to then have this added burden of having to do all of the data entry subsequent was programmatically one of the reasons that they opted not to pursue holding the flu clinics as they have in the past. They feel that the pharmacies and the other locations who are already ramping up and have the bandwidth to be able to manage the flow of individuals requesting a flu shot on an intermittent basis, as opposed to everybody showing up for a few hours on one specific day. It wasn't programmatically something that they felt that they could support given their staffing model right now.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks for explaining that. And have you thought about doing a drive-through clinic?
I have not, because the requirements would still be the same. Whoever administered the shot would still need to be entering the information into the state system, and they just don't have the staff and time to do that.
I understand. Thank you so much for explaining that to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions on the Zoom call tonight? Chief, I think you're good to go.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you, Chief.
Moving on with our agenda, the next item is a Lowland Forum follow-up. So, folks may recall that back on August 25th, this board conducted a Lowland Industrial Park traffic forum. It brought in about 113 participants. The board heard from approximately 26 individual callers, most of which were residents of Holliston. The concerns voiced were consistent, loud, and clear to our board. We promised some follow-up, and this evening we wanted to give folks at home that follow-up and what's ahead. I'll open it up to the board's discussion in just a moment and to Mr. Ahern for his update. But this evening, we directed Mr. Ahern to post his memo to us, which was dated September 30th, on the town website. So if any folks are joining us on the Zoom call, or certainly any time after tonight, they can read up on his 10-page summary of the issue at hand, and they can quickly see and determine that this is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but the solution nevertheless is within focus. Mr. Ahern.
If you'd like, Chris Mayo can show where that is on the website for anybody watching from home.
Please, thank you. So you can see Chris is clicking on boards and committees. Under Select Board, scroll down on the left, nearly at the bottom, and you'll see the Lowland Street traffic information.
And there's
The
the
last item on that list is the town administrative memo. So we hope folks will take a chance to read that. It's well done. I think what Travis did for us is not only capture the essence of what the feedback was at the forum, he gives us a brief history of the environment around the industrial park, some history surrounding previous attempts for vehicle exclusions, and then he goes into some potential next steps. Before we get into that, I just wanted to give my colleagues a chance to weigh in on the work that we've done to date and to advise those assembled what their thoughts are. Ben, if you have any comments at this point?
Well, first of all, Travis, thank you for putting all this together. There was a lot of information there. I learned a lot, and there was quite a bit to digest and think about. And as the chair had mentioned, this is a very complex issue with a lot of inputs and pieces that are a lot of moving parts. I think, as I read it, I think, sort of like at a very high level, I think, there's certainly other pieces, but what I see the main things that we really need to do is to collect data, to understand the scope of the problem and the nature of the problem. We've certainly heard from residents that it is a problem, but we need to have a little bit more of the fine pieces when it comes to talking to MassDOT and other actors. We need to sort of understand the legality and the sort of the steps that we have to take when we want to do some of the things that we want to do. And how do we enforce the things that we want to put in place? To me, those are the biggest issues that I was looking at. I mean, I certainly, I don't want to get too in the weeds on some of there was a couple questions and a couple things that I wanted to look at and address, and I'm not sure if this is the right time to do it, but at the same time, certainly at this meeting, but I do want to say thank you for putting this together. Thank you about thinking about these things, and I just think there's a lot here. There's a lot to think about, and we have some work to do. as a board and as a community to start to address these problems.
I'm happy to get in the weeds, I would say, to the point of, the length of it. I think, I don't know anybody's going to say this is the right length. It's probably either way too long or way too short, right, because it is a complicated issue. So I would just, I would say we can get into any of these things, but to your point, a lot of it is, seeking direction from the board, any direction the board would like to go in. I've just tried to lay out some of the things that we're going to need to collect to pursue those.
Sure.
It's fine.
Yeah, I'm ready to act. I am here with a very clear idea. This report is fantastic, and nothing that I have to say tonight is without support from this report. I feel everything that I'm, about to share comes right out of this report. So you've done a fantastic job, and more importantly, I really think the residents and all who attended the forum to bring forward their ideas and their thoughts and their concerns. My work through Complete Streets, my work with the Traffic Advisory Committee, my general passion for improving walkability and bikeability in our community, my work on a couple different grant programs, my work with Safe Routes to School, my work as liaison for the Trail Committee bring me to a very specific point here tonight. I would like to initiate the process of seeking a truck exclusion on Woodland Street. You have it documented. For those who are looking at the report now online, it's page 5 of the report. It's about the second or third paragraph. It's been my belief for the better part of a year that we have exactly what you've got documented here, that we possess the necessary documentation to pursue MassDOT approval for heavy commercial vehicle exclusion on Woodland Street. So I am prepared tonight to consider a vote for that. I am also in favor of quickly pursuing measures to provide a protected bike and or walking lane along Lowland Street to improve access to the rail trail. I think you have that on page 6 of the report. I think it's the second or third paragraph down. We've certainly heard that from individuals. In your report, you also have the idea of exploring a traffic mitigation revolving fund. We know we have active development proposals and projects here in town. I think that a traffic mitigation revolving fund is a very smart step forward for us for addressing future problems. And then in terms of, I'm going to call it jake braking, but the true term is compression release engine braking. We don't have specific language in our traffic rules and orders document to address compression release engine braking, and I'd like to ask that we direct our town council to explore language that goes into our rules and orders. I would be looking personally for a town-wide ban on compression release engine braking, and I think, again, we need to have an expansion of our traffic rules and orders to have that. I would also be in favor of a discussion considering fines for any enforcement that were to happen in that regard. I think this is much bigger and is not in this report, but one of the things that you come to learn when you read about compression release engine braking is that excessive changes in speed are why often you have those sounds being made by trucks as they're sort of forced to use their jake brakes. We have many areas where heavy trucks moving down a steep hill come to an almost abrupt stop as they hit the downtown area. I'm thinking right now specifically of Washington coming down from Highland Street. You have trucks that are traveling upwards of 35, 40 miles an hour that within a half mile, quarter mile even come to an abrupt stop. And so I would really like to see in the future, as we work with MassDOT, to look for slowing speeds on Washington Street. But that's not really within this topic tonight. So again, just to summarize, I'm looking for a truck exclusion on Woodland Street. I'm looking for protected bike and walking lanes on Lowland Street, and I'm looking for a discussion on a traffic mitigation revolving fund. And finally, I am looking for a town-wide ban on jake braking. That includes changes to our traffic rules and orders, possibly including fines. That's all I got.
Okay.
Thank you, Tina. So my feedback does echo a lot of what Tina just talked about. I want to draw the reader's attention to what you'll see on page 3, I believe, where he talks about the MassDOT heavy commercial vehicle exclusion work and the process for MassDOT approval, notwithstanding the item on Woodland that Ms. Hine just spoke about. In order for us to cope with what appears to be a larger scope issue in and around Lowland, clearly a study would be needed to produce the desired data that MassDOT will need to determine whether or not further and additional exclusions would be approved or enabled. This item, I think, Travis, goes to the warrant article that you've had plugged for some time here as a special town meeting article. I think for the purposes of this discussion, funding the traffic engineering study to include these streets should also explore streets up near the 555 Hopping Brook area, specifically South Street. So in terms of an action item, that's one item I think we need to lean into. We're going to need funding to pay for this study. There's no point in moving ahead with any actions associated with other streets without the data that we need. MassDOT's made it clear they need this information in order for them to approve it. So I think as an action item, that's clearly something that has to be accomplished at this special town meeting. So I would encourage folks to read up on that. And if they're inclined to support it, please show up at the special town meeting now scheduled for December 5th. Further discussion on the report.
Do you mind if I just do a very high level how
Sure.
to read? So I just wanted to put together a few things. First of all, there's a final page that summarizes all of the action items, and it's numbered. That is not a priority numberization. It is strictly how it flows in the document. So the first section here for truck routes and restrictions, I do look at some of the heavy commercial vehicle restrictions that have been voted and are in our traffic rules and regulations. I think one of the things through the process that we've started with Mass DOT is to make sure that if those are in place and the town is in favor of them, that we make sure that they are enforceable. And we've gone through all the steps, regardless of whether or not they exist now. I think we need to make sure that they are up to snuff, and we have backup for them. Then looking at Mass DOT approval, I understand this is a little wordy, but just explaining the process we have to go through and some of the streets that we discussed, including Woodland. And then finally, some of the other streets that were discussed and whether or not they need that particular action or if there are other actions we may want to take. Enforceability and public safety, I went into quite a bit. Some of this has to do with what Chief Stone can obviously update us on whenever you'd like, but he's already started to put together a traffic safety unit. I think that would be valuable to bring him in front of us at some point to go through that, to answer any questions and obviously receive the support from the board. And that might be more of an FY22 budget conversation, but we can go through that. Weight limits and some of the things that he needs to be prepared to enforce if the town wants to go in that direction. Finally, noise complaints. I know Ms. Hine just mentioned some of that. I think from our Mass DOT conversations, I think there needs to be an understanding of what we can and can't do when it comes to state-owned roadways. Mass DOT is never going to be in favor of the no Jake break, quote unquote, or the other ways that's worded that is not the proprietary term of Jake breaking, because they are not going to restrict a truck's ability to stop because of liability concerns. We have separate abilities to do things off of the state-owned roadways, and there are portions of 16 that are not technically state-owned. We have ownership, so we can get into that sort of line, but there are certainly things in here. Additionally, one part of the noise specifically that came up through resident feedback was prohibited uses. So I mentioned that here in some of the casework that the outgoing building inspector did for us for that. And then the last thing was just looking at regional solutions. We also heard on the call from a gentleman from the Sherburne Planning Board. I think some of that raised some interesting things. And then a lot of the state partnerships that Ms. Hine mentioned, some of the programs that the town has already started to get involved in and what we need to do. And then again, throughout the document, anywhere an action item was identified, it's summarized at the end. But again, it's just the flow of the document and not necessarily priority.
Thank you. So appreciate that. Ben, any feedback?
Yeah, so I guess I'll get in the weeds. Two questions. One of them,
Join us.
Tina already, but no, I know. I do support a lot of the
Keep
things
it
that
on.
Tina was bringing up. I think one of the things that I had heard through people who contacted me was about better walkability on Lowland Street and So I think that, Tina brought that up. I think that's something that's important too, to be able to increase that accessibility for folks. So my two questions, the first is like, if we pursue pushing the traffic onto Route 16 via the Whitney Street intersection, that's a kind of a complicated area. You have the rail trail, you have Brook Street, you have Old Locust Street, you have that hill there. So there's a lot of different factors coming into that particular spot. One of the things, I brought this up before when I was on the FinCom, is that there was a gift fund, I think you actually brought it up, the Casella gift fund, that's sort of to deal with sort of that transfer station. That's another factor. Could that money be used for design, or at least looking at that, improving that because it's a lot of intersections, there's a lot of pieces and moving parts there, so just putting a traffic light on Whitney Street to Washington would have a ripple effect over a lot of places. Could that money be used for something like that, to explore that particular area?
So one of the issues that I mentioned in here is the site visibility when it comes to the Whitney and Washington. I think we have to look at the way that those funds were received and specifically what they were tied to. It is for improvements to the roadway in the area. We could make an argument that accomplishes it. At the same point, design and engineering was sort of not description for those funds. What we're talking about is potentially routing all traffic through one entrance exit when it comes to heavy commercial vehicles, and so I think we would need to make the case that lines up with the intent of those dollars. It was more intended for fixing the roadway, so to speak, right? Gotcha. So it's a little bit of a stretch, but at the same point, it's there for those purposes. We did get a little bit of feedback just to sort of, I know Mass DOT will be coming back to sort of give us more information, but just preliminary looking at Whitney, that is an area of 16 that is not necessarily state-owned, right? That we have sort of possession of that section. Okay. That doesn't mean that the state is not there to help us if we have questions, but it's just one component of the conversation. A design for something like that, as you said, it needs to interact with the crossing of the rail trail. There are utility poles sort of smack dab in the middle of it. Yep. There would most likely need to be a widening for a left and right turn out of the park. So there's a number of different components. Right. I would say that a design of that would probably be about $150,000. And then that's obviously before the actual project. And so what we would want to do, and I think, this is, again, something that the direction of the board, we can start to pursue that. We would certainly want, in an ideal world, for the state to be mostly involved in the actual construction of that project if it was something that the town was in favor of. Okay. The design, to your point, could we get creative with dollars that are there through the Casella funds? We can certainly try to make that case. Okay.
Can I just jump in, because we had not previously talked about making a single point of entry and exit into the industrial park. I just want to make my feelings on that known. I am very much in support of it, and I also would not want to link in any way a truck exclusion on Woodland Street as being more or less necessary depending upon a single point of entry. And I say that because Woodland Street will always be, regardless of access to the industrial park, will always be a safe route to school. So to me, that separates it from any decision about traffic in and out of the industrial park. So I would not want to muddle those two decisions. I see them as completely separate. And again, I absolutely support the idea of exploring a single point of entry into the industrial park, because that puts it right in line with other industrial parks that we have. And
for heavy commercial vehicles.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
so
correct.
I just want to, and I know it was up on the screen earlier, but I just want to reiterate one point to set expectations, is that for any heavy commercial vehicle exclusion, there are always exemptions. Mm-hmm. So if a street is going directly to anything on that street, so right for our own property of the school, if a truck is going to our school on Woodland Street, there can't be the expectation that we won't have any heavy commercial vehicles. I just want, and I stated in the document, but I just want to state it here as well. But I think to the point that you've made when it comes to Woodland or when it comes to using Whitney as the primary access point for trucks, heavy commercial vehicles, excuse me, that certainly addressing Whitney would certainly help the heavy commercial vehicles have access to 16 to take a left. Because right now, that may be a driving factor. We don't know specifically, but to turn left on a 16, they have a light at Woodland, they don't at Whitney. And I think that's sort of the genesis of your question.
Yes.
And so I think it's something to pursue, certainly. I think it's something that we're going to need MassDOT help on for a number of reasons, including the finances of it. We certainly don't want to be on the hook for it, but also just design, it is our portion of 16, but it is still 16.
Sure.
Right, so I guess to kind of follow up on that message, Travis, the steps ahead for this board would be to consider, through the article at a special town meeting, the work to study the traffic flow in that area for the purposes of developing traffic counts and data for the MassDOT folks to evaluate the various streets captured in your memo for potential exclusions. Once and if we get that information from MassDOT, we use that empirically to then go to the state, number one, and say, is this the type of project we can partner with you on to benefit the improved traffic flow of Route 16 in that area? Always seeking state money for that type of solution. Because I think, as you mentioned, that the dollars that MassDOT told us were at stake here were quite large. In other words, we couldn't necessarily enact all all vehicle exclusions and expect good things to happen. We will need some kind of signalization and traffic flow studies to get there. One will probably have to precede the other. That's how you understand it?
Yes.
Okay. Regarding Woodland Street, there is a property on that street as well that is a business. You mentioned that trucks may go and come and back and forth to the businesses on Woodland Street, including the schools. So if there were an exclusion on Woodland Street, would the business, for example, that sells fuel to these vehicles be beholden to an exclusion, or are they exempt?
So the way that the exemption is written is that a heavy commercial vehicle cannot be excluded from going to its destination on the road regardless of the HCVE. So if the business that the truck if it's necessary for the truck to go to that location, the exemption is for the exclusion, so the truck can go there.
But through enforcement, Holliston PD, if they were to examine any truck traffic, they'd have to show evidence that they were on their way to an appointment or having just fueled there to prove that they weren't in violation of the exclusion.
Right. Hypothetically, right, if a truck is making a delivery to our school, they would have evidence of the delivery, right? And I believe, for the most part, most of these vehicles and most of the delivery, or if it's whatever business they're conducting, there would be the ability to show that why they're doing that, and therefore that initiates the exemption to the exclusion, if that's not exemptions to exclusions. I don't know the best way to make that clear.
My final question on the Woodland Street exclusion. This would prohibit vehicles from leaving Lowland Industrial Park on Lowland onto Woodland, correct?
So there is a map as attachment A on here.
So they're not allowed to access Woodland, not just coming in, but also exiting.
That's correct.
Okay.
And again, as I note in here, in the Holliston traffic rules and orders is High Street. Again, one of the conversations I think we need to have with MassDOT very explicitly is that was that ever run through MassDOT? If we want to be able to enforce it, we need to make sure that that's in good standing with MassDOT. And I'm not aware that at the point that this town voted that as a select board a number of years ago, that process was followed. There are three instances that I laid out here. High is one of them, and I mention it because Woodland becomes High.
They'd have a hard time a truck would have a hard time going down High Street.
They do, though.
Yeah.
They do. We've had complaints.
High
You're right.
Street,
I mean, it's
I used to live on High Street too.
It's extraordinarily narrow.
But it's not the easiest. There's also a big hill with a stop sign at the top, so it would be kind of a challenge for I mean, certainly, like, you shouldn't see tractor trailers going down there because they would have a hard time with it.
I think you just opened yourself up to a whole bunch of public comment there, Ben.
No, I think,
I lived on High Street.
as I
Yeah,
lay
yeah,
out,
it's-
as I lay out here, you know, I specifically referenced everybody who showed up at the forum and spoke in the streets that were represented there. Additionally, a lot of the streets, some of the streets had individuals who sort of pulled their neighbors to co-sign on to their feelings about heavy commercial vehicles on their streets. High Street we did hear from, so it has seemed to still be an issue, but I just pointed out because the town took a vote,
Yeah.
and if we're following this procedure, which is to loop in MassDOT so that anything we decide to do is enforceable by our HPD, I think we need to double check the ones that were done previously as well, is the point there.
Travis, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, I had one other question. It's a slightly moving past Woodland, because one of the things that I think came up was, there was some particular talk about Bullard Street. And it sounds like, when you look at a map, that it's basically like a truck would originate from, say, I think it was 109 or 115, would come from Medway or Millis, basically, and come down through, down Bullard towards Fisk and Lowland. And one of my concerns about any of these actions is just to sort of, is that is there anything we can do with Medway and Millis? I mean, we're certainly talking to them about Clark vis-a-vis South Street, but I want to make that is there things that we can do to sort of limit the flow of traffic that gets to Bullard? Like, is there ways that we can kind of keep it away from that, creating that situation in the first place? Because they're coming from somewhere, and it's sort of that unintended consequences. We put the lights up in downtown, suddenly Mudville became much more popular because people were moving in that other direction. And I just want to kind of think about, like, are we sort of, like, what can we do to sort of limit from that direction that particular traffic? Because I do have concerns about that side of things. And I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just curious. I didn't see any particular language, or maybe I missed it.
So I don't think it's an answer to your question, or maybe even particularly helpful, but I can just say this. Through the Metro West Regional Collaborative, our legislative aid can share with the regional collaborative that covers Medway and Millis that this is happening in the town of Holliston, and can get that information over to that regional collaborative. And my understanding is through that regional collaborative, again, that covers Millis and Medway, there are efforts underway to do a regional truck traffic impact study.
Okay.
So I think the wheels are starting to turn, that this is a regional problem.
regional
But
issue, yeah.
directly to your comment, were we to make a truck exclusion in the town of Holliston that would impact those two communities, we could share it that way.
Yeah,
So
I just
to let
want to
them
be
know.
careful, because I just don't want it to turn into, okay, we fixed Bullard, but now it still doesn't fix the issue of the trucks coming from that direction, or if there are ways we can limit it. I think that's something that we need to consider, is the trucks coming from that particular direction, as we, because some of the, it was concerning what I heard from some of the folks on Bullard, and I've, driving down that street, it's not equipped to handle truck traffic, and it is kind of a dangerous, precarious route.
Bullard and Woodland, as I outline here, I mean, one other component that we didn't discuss tonight, but it is outlined here, is our infrastructure when it comes to culverts. We have a few crossings of brooks in that area. At the end of the day, we can't use the weight restrictions on culverts to get around the process that we need to go through to get a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion. I mean, obviously that's sort of, people have gone that route before, and MassDOT's wise to it. At the same point, when you do point those things out, sometimes the end result is they tell you need to fix your culvert. Those can be costly, but at the same, we don't want a truck in a culvert, collapsed culvert. So we have a few options there. I think it's one of the things. The other thing, and I could be wrong, you know the area better than I do. I think one of the things we heard on the call from the gentleman from Sherburne was efforts from Sherburne on Western Ave. And I think one of the things we need to consider, especially when we look at regional solutions and how our decisions are impacting others and others are impacting us, is my understanding is that, moving people off of Western could impact that area, including Bullard. I could be wrong. I didn't expressly put that in the memo, but those types of things, I think, to Ms. Hines' point, this is all certainly interconnected.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion on these items? Anybody on the Zoom call wish to ask any questions of the board?
Names and addresses.
Yep.
Hi, I'd like to ask a question, but can you hear me?
We can. Would ask you to identify yourself by name and address, please.
My name is Carol McGarry. I actually live in Sherburne on Western Avenue. And I've been talking here to people both at Planning Board and Traffic Safety about the truck issues on Western Avenue because of the Odessa proposal.
Yep.
And, you know, as I listen to all of you, it sounds like you're coming up with some very reasonable, you know, suggestions for Holliston, but I did want to make you aware of the situation on Western Avenue, which is we already have fairly heavy truck traffic, and I've seen an upsurge in the last year or so, and it seems to be landscaping trucks, trash trucks, and so I'm very concerned about an increase in traffic coming from Odessa. You know, I've started to address this along with, I actually have a letter that I can copy the select board on. The reason it's a concern is that Western Avenue is residential along the entire street. It doesn't have a shoulder. It doesn't have sidewalks. There's a playing field, a soccer playing field with kids and families. The Barber Reservation has lots of families and hikers coming in and out. There's a horse arena across the street from me. There are people jogging, cycling, and we're really finding that it really is quite dangerous with the level of truck traffic that's now coming. The lanes here are about 11 foot wide, so there's really no place for the trucks to go if they're trying to get around people except into the opposite lane. So I'm bringing this up just, I think, really to reinforce what John Higley said, that, you know, this is a regional issue. I think, you know, I don't know exactly the best way to reduce truck traffic overall on these suburban residential streets, but it's a problem for Western Avenue, and it's a problem because it's completely residential. I didn't mention it's a scenic road, and there are, I think, 14 houses along it that are on the town's historic asset survey. So on our side, I think, you know, I've been working with Traffic Safety and Planning Board. We're planning to do a truck count. It's helpful to see the things that you're doing there. I certainly don't think, we don't want to do anything that will increase anybody else's truck traffic, but at the same time, it would be good for both towns to be looking at this together when there are proposals, especially that would increase truck traffic. And I think it would be good for both towns to look for ways to actively reduce truck traffic.
Always agree with that sentiment, Carol. Thank you. Did you want to add
Carol,
something?
I just want to say that I think that, you know, the city of Framingham needs to be part of these conversations as well. And whenever it comes up on the Metro West Regional Collaborative, this is something that we need to be talking about. I don't know if Sherburne has a representative who attends the Metro West Regional Collaborative meetings, but that is a very good place to share the concerns that you just raised, and I'll make sure I carry it forward when we go again. Framingham does attend those meetings, and I think they need to hear the concerns. We know Western Ave connects pretty much downtown Framingham to Route 16 pretty directly, so thank you for your comments.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll bring that suggestion back to people here about the Metro West Regional Collaborative.
Great, thank you.
Anything else, Carol?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on the Zoom call regarding the Lowland Industrial Park plan to date?
Yeah, it's Carol Corey again on 40 Bullitt Street.
Hi, Carol. Good evening.
Hi, once again this week. I understand Carol's, previous Carol's concerns regarding Western Ave and traffic, and I can fully understand where she's coming from because Bullard has the same issue. Bullard's a little bit different insofar as we start in Holliston, we end in Holliston, we don't go through any other town except Holliston. Plus, we already know that the culvert that's right outside my door practically has collapsed. The roadway hasn't, but there's no way water's getting through if we have massive snows this year. I know that right now you're going to do a study, and it sounds like there probably will never be any type of weight restriction on this road, even though I do believe that we should have the power to put that in, because it's just a shortcut. I mean, Bullard never had an issue until the lights came in downtown Holliston. As soon as those lights came in, all of a sudden Bullard became a major truck route. And I know these trucks aren't coming from Holliston. I know these trucks are coming in from Route 115 and 109. I know they're coming in from Norfolk. They're coming in from Millis. They're coming in from Medway. They're going either to the recycling center or the ABC Recycles, or they're going to the Cavanta. And we're, you know, as I've illustrated before, they're not just dump trucks anymore. They're 18-wheelers. They're huge. And, you know, and I've even seen them coming from Lista and everyone else. So I don't know what the solutions are, except for the fact that it appears to me that Bullitt Street is going to become the major truck route for Holliston if we don't try and stop it. And maybe there is no intention to stop it, because God knows, I'm sure you don't want this stuff going downtown Holliston. And there's no other route unless it's going to go down Central Ave. I know we don't have any ways or any means of stopping traffic from going down Central, because Central does connect through multiple towns. And I guess I want to know, or be reassured from the board tonight, whether or not Bullitt Street's intention is to be a truck route.
It is not.
Okay.
Carol, I don't know if you've had a chance to read the memo. We put it up this afternoon, but please note that Travis identified Bullard as a street to consider for potential exclusion. I believe it's on page 5 of the memo. Okay?
Okay.
Any other questions, Carol?
No, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments from callers this evening? I see one from Sarah Baroud. Hi, Sarah.
Hi there. I'm Sarah Baroud. I'm at 21 Lowland Street. I just wanted to say thank you to you all, especially Tina and Travis for your comments, and Travis for preparing that wonderful document. These are excellent action items, and I think this is moving at a great pace in terms of getting things accomplished. Tina, I just want to back up your recommendations for next steps as a resident on Lowland Street, right near Woodland. I think this would be amazing. And as you mentioned previously in the meeting, with a lot of kids walking to school this year and using the trail potentially all through the school year, winter into spring, it would be really important to ensure safety on the trail, at the trail crossings, and that certainly includes Lowland Street. So we, as a family, and I think as a neighborhood, I'll just speak for myself, but as a family, we'd really appreciate these action items moving ahead. So we appreciate all the efforts. Thank you.
Sarah, you stopped me dead in my tracks there. My husband's name is actually Travis, so when you said Tina and Travis, I was thinking, no, he had nothing to do with it, but you're referring to this Travis.
To both. Thank you to both. All of the above.
Any other comments on the Zoom call tonight? Karen, good evening. How are you? Karen Langton?
Yep. Hi, I'm fine. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing great. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to call and second what Sarah had to say. First off, this is an exceedingly thorough next steps memorandum. I've never seen anything so thorough in regard to the issues that we suffer in this area. I am at 100 Woodland Street. To emphasize being able to
in the future, hopefully back out of the driveway and not feel so under pressure or fearful, to be able to walk on the street, to be able to cross at the trail, to be able to run the perfect 3.2-mile loop around town and know that we can share the road with everybody else would be just an amazing opportunity in this area. I think people move to the part of town that I am in specifically to be able to walk and are shocked when we can't. So again, I thank you so much for looking at this. We 100% support what Tina has motioned for in the area, and we hope that you are able to move through on that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Karen. Sherry, don't have your last name, but you're next up.
Sherry Haverford.
My last name is Hafford on 242 Lowland Street in Holliston. It looks to me when I look at the map as if entire Lowland Street will be a truck thoroughfare during the day. And one thing I'm hoping that somebody is paying attention to is the Jeffrey Whitney connection to Lowland, because tractor trailer trucks are parked along there in front of the Stanley building. You've got backup of traffic, something fierce, so that it's one tiny lane where everybody trying to go home after work, it's pretty jam-packed. And I don't know if that's something that's been, I haven't read the document that was put together, but I'm hoping that's something that somebody understands needs to be addressed. And I'd like to also say thank you very much for how seriously y'all are taking this problem at this end of Holliston. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. We told folks when we started the forum that we needed to start from scratch. There's been a fair amount of work done over the years to identify problems, but it seemed to be not a cohesive plan. We wanted to take a step back, hear your thoughts and concerns, and give the apparatus of town government a chance to come together with a plan that addresses what is very clearly a complex issue. We think the town administrator's done a good job distilling a lot of these concerns for us to digest, and I think folks on the call, folks who read this document and going forward will understand there's a lot more to do. We'll likely take some steps this evening to begin a process, but it's going to likely take some months to come together and understand how to collectively look at this problem and map out a full solution that might take quite a long time. The next steps following this meeting tonight will include hopefully some dialogue on an article for the special town meeting in December. We're also looking forward to a follow-up meeting with MassDOT. We've been promised a follow-up meeting that will include state legislators to help us identify potential solutions, including funding. We've received incredible support from Senator Spilka's office, Representative Dykeman's office to date, and frankly, we can't go down this route, pun intended, I guess, without MassDOT's help. So we're on our way. We like the direction things are heading, but we sincerely appreciate your patience, much of which has worn thin over the years. But we hope by the time we get there, you'll understand that the work that takes us there is going to involve a fair amount of effort. So, any other questions? Carol, it looks like you have your hand up again.
Yes, question for you. Only because I've been on these meetings now for quite some time. With the special meeting that you're going to have, I believe, scheduled for December, is any of that going to be on Zoom, or is it all in person?
So that's the special town meeting. It will be broadcast, but in order to vote, you'll have to be in attendance. That'll be held at the high school auditorium on a Saturday.
Right.
That is not by
but
choice.
it will be broadcast that same day?
If you are unable to attend, I don't know if they live stream the town meeting. I think they might. It's quite likely they will, yes.
Oh, did Christian just raise his hand to say he'll be there, make sure it happens? I think he did, yes.
It's
Thanks,
likely it
Christian.
will be, Carol, to give you an answer.
We can't receive votes. The state did not allow that because we are an open town meeting, so it is not a choice that we've made.
I fully understand, and I realize I wouldn't have a vote, but at the same time, due to my health conditions, I will not subject myself to being in the school. but I would still like to be able to know what's happening or be able to hear what's happening.
Yeah, the expectation is,
Which why I'm asking for
yep, the
that.
expectation is that, yes, you will.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Patrick Hafford, you've got a question for us?
Yeah, this is Pat Hafford. I live at 242 Lowland Street as well. I'm wondering if the easiest way to prevent traffic is to not have businesses that constantly require large truck traffic. And the work that you're doing, number one, it's incredibly good. And this is the best it has ever been in terms of the town responding to something that's clearly a problem. So we definitely appreciate that. Look forward to reading your report in detail. But in the meantime, there are meetings about Odessa and what they want to do and how many trucks they're going to be bringing through here. The impact to Western Avenue, but also the impact to Lowland Street as well as Bullard. How are those going to be at least considered after you have a plan, as opposed to rushing in to do something, creating a problem, and then complaining that we have a big problem to take care of? So I think the work needs to be finished and the planning needs to be finished before we launch into a new set of problems. Otherwise, we just exacerbate the current situation. I have one other thing. Is there, and obviously you're really well informed of what we can or can't do, but what about the idea of putting speed bumps on a street like Lowland Street? Those trucks, those large trucks come smoking up and down the street. It is a narrow street. When people turn onto it onto Fisk, there's not room for two big trucks at one time for sure. So is it possible to slow them down without asking them to, obey the sign? That's not going to go anywhere. But I was in another town the other day and I realized they had put speed bumps around an area such as ours so people couldn't zoom in and out. If the road's going to remain open, are there things we can do to slow down the traffic, which will make it quieter and safer? And that's it.
Patrick, thanks so much for your comments. I think Ms. Hine has something to say, and then I'll add to that. Go ahead, Tina.
Speed bumps are an option. They're not an option that is preferred by our DPW. They run into operations issues and some maintenance issues too. So when the question of speed bumps as a form of speed control come up, what we hear is that in terms of equipment and training of snowplow drivers and the like, they are definitely not the preferred way of calming traffic and lowering speeds. I think it's always on the table for a conversation. I think DPW's voice on the matter is quite a significant one, and to date they have not been supportive of the use of speed bumps for the reasons I just mentioned.
Patrick, if I could add on to Ms. Hine's comments, I think clearly as we enter the arena of vehicle exclusions, as Mr. Ahern has laid out and this board has made clear, one of the items that's been missing for quite some time is enforcement. Holliston's police department has not been situated or organized in such a way to feature traffic enforcement involving commercial vehicles. That's changing. Chief Stone has committed to a traffic enforcement model. And I think going forward, you're going to have to envision more Holliston police enforcement of traffic rules, including speed on the Lowland stretch that you referred to, as well as commercial vehicle access in and around our roadways. We recognize that going forward, this is going to be an emerging part of the Holliston Police Department's mission, yet they are funded for traffic enforcement, and we think it's time that they embrace that. Chief Stone embraces it. So I think the short answer to your question is enforcement is the key to maintaining road control for vehicles of that nature in streets like the one you mentioned. Okay, any other questions tonight? Mr. Ahern, you have a comment.
I would just like to say thank you to Karen Sherman, Chris Canny, Chief Stone, Chief Cassidy, and Sean Reese in helping with the development of this document.
Mr. Sparrow, any final comments?
Nope, just again, thank you very much, Travis, for putting this together and your hard work, and writing all this up, and this was very informative, so I really appreciate it, and we got a lot of work to do, but thank you for getting us on our way.
Ms. Hine, any final comments?
No.
Okay. All right.
Well, depending on what you're going to do next, no.
Yeah, right. How about that? I would like to, I think I'm getting a consensus from the board that there are some areas within Mr. Ahern's memo that I think we can take some action on this evening, resting assured that there is much more to do, as I mentioned. This evening, I'd like to address from Mr. Ahern's memo items number 5, 7, 8, and 11. I'll read them. Number 5 is pursue an HC vehicle. Sorry. What is the H again?
Heavy commercial.
Heavy, thank you. I'm drawing a brain fart. Heavy commercial vehicle exclusion on roadways in the Lowland Industrial Park area at direction of the Select Board, with Woodland Street being the first possible application. Number 7, town to research ways to increase enforceabilities of noise issues, may require bylaw changes, and I think Ms. Hine, you mentioned likely a town council directive there. Number 8, town to look at feasibility, partially related to cost of hiring or contracting with a sound engineer to help with enforcement of noise infractions. And number 11, prioritize the safe routes to schools for residents in the Lowland Industrial Park area. Before I take any motions, I would like Mr. Ahern to address number 8 with respect to the feasibility of hiring or contracting a sound engineer to help with enforcement of noise infractions. How do you envision that item to be funded and or initiated, given the steps we're interested in this evening?
So one of the issues here, I think, to have a fully fleshed out plan when it comes to paying, we're probably on an FY22 funding schedule. We could probably look at some options in the interim. As I indicate here on page 8, the way it's written is that if the violation is found, then the violator is obligated to pay, and if we lose, essentially, that the town is on the hook for that cost. So we need to be prepared for that.
Okay.
And that's one of the issues that I have here. So the reason that's here to begin with is as Chris, who we know is transitioning out,
Chris Canny.
Chris Canny from the organization, and we actually started the process of interviewing for his replacement today, and we'll continue this week. I would need that individual for the most part. The building inspector is our zoning enforcement officer, and so that person needs to essentially have the tools to pursue noise complaints, noise violations, and take it to the end. And what we have found is that the only way to really take that to the end of the line when it comes to noise infractions is to have professionals do those measurements. So there are a couple things. One, the building department does have a revolving fund. It is a very specific use, and I would have to look at the availability of using that in this instance. I think it may be problematic. So 2 would be building into that individual's budget for FY22 the ability to sort of get those testings done. In the event that we lose, they would need to be covered through the budget. In the event that, if an infraction was found and we pursue that to the end of the line, if it is a violation, the violation is not paid for by the town. We need to have that protection in the budget. So my thought here, as I indicate, is that is an FY22 timeline. At the same point, I can certainly look at ways that we can set up the incoming building inspector to be prepared to at least pursue egregious cases in the interim in some way.
Can I jump in on that one for a
Sure.
minute? So could a sound study, which is a real thing, be performed along with the type of traffic studies that we're talking about? So if we're talking about, say, Washington Street in the area of where we're getting some of the noise complaints, especially when it comes to the jake braking, we do a speed study that includes a noise study, a sound study. I don't know if such a combination exists, but that's where I was thinking when I saw number 8 was, do we wrap that up with the type of traffic studies that we're proposing in the article that's going on the special town meeting? And so I think you need a little input to know whether or not traffic engineers do sound studies, but the little bit of digging that I've done and the little bit of input that I've gotten is that, yes, the sound study goes with the speed study, so you determine how many decibels at the speeds at which the types of cars that are on the road are traveling. So if that's an option, that may be a way to include this in what is envisioned with the article and the
Yes.
special town meeting warrant.
So my response was more on the enforcement side. You're talking more data collection?
Yes.
Is it information that we can collect through those studies? I believe it is. The way that I was looking at it was more when individuals come to our building inspector and say that they believe that a business is in an open area, breaking, sort of ordinance, and they expect the building inspector to be able to go in there and say, you are breaking, you are in violation of our bylaws. This is a sort of process that's been laid out of how you go through that, so that at the end of the road, if you end up in court, you have the information that will get you a favorable result. And that was what I was looking at in terms of enforcement. You're correct. I think we can certainly work into the article that we're talking about in terms of traffic engineering, collecting data.
Okay.
What I was talking about was sort of giving the building inspector the tools necessary for enforcement.
So I am satisfied on number 8 if it can become a part of sort of the bigger picture of traffic studies and data collection. I'm satisfied on number 8.
You're thinking to expand the article.
You mentioned data collection, and I think that's how you would do it. All forms of data related to traffic, which would include sound.
Sound and counts and traffic flow, yeah. All right. Anything else on that? All right. At this point, I'd like to entertain some motions. After reading the action items that I just put forth, that I believe we have consensus on, I'll start with let's start with number 11. Prioritize safe routes to schools for residents in the Lowland Industrial Park area. I'll take a motion to endorse that prioritization.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Number 8, as we just spoke about, look to include the sound engineering efforts for enforcement of noise infractions under the current article being proposed for the special town meeting. So Travis, you're going to expand essentially the scope to include that effect.
Yeah, and we can discuss that shortly as we discuss the warrant.
All right. Well, let's take a motion under the project plan to endorse the effort for that. I'll take a motion to support the hiring of a sound engineer to help with enforcement of noise infractions associated with this plan.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second with a question.
Go.
Is that if this is enforcement and we're putting it to that article, that seems more like a data collection, and what you were talking about was, we're talking about two separate things, right? We're talking about, enforcement would be working with the building inspector to enforce it versus simply expanding the article, which would be a data collection exercise. And I'm in favor of both. I just kind of want to make sure that we're looking at both.
Well, I think we're talking about the feasibility piece of it, and so the direction for Travis, given the motion, if approved, would be the type of, so again, specific to that article, the data needed. So I think it's the first part of that, number 8.
So we would be looking at the feasibility to help with enforcement. Okay, so we would be
playing with words a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that
I think the motion, Ben, is to support moving the sound engineering work under the existing warrant article for traffic enforcement.
Okay. Yep.
And we'll rely on the town administrator to ward that up for us.
Sure.
That's all we're doing.
Okay, then I'll second
The
that.
motion on the warrant will come later in the article.
No,
and so
I understand.
forth.
I just want to make sure that if there's two
All right.
pieces to it, that which pieces we're talking about.
Right.
All those in favor with that, say aye.
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 That carries. Number 7, town to research ways to increase enforceability of noise issues may require bylaw changes. Mr. Hearn, this motion would be to direct the town council to examine the town's bylaws and to make any recommendations thereof for changes to enforce noise issues associated with commercial and vehicular traffic.
Are you making the motion there? Because if so, I would move to make that motion.
So Ms. Hine moves to create or direct the town administrator, direct town council to evaluate town bylaws relative to enforceability of noise issues. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 That carries. And number 5, pursue a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion on the Lowland Industrial Park area at the direction of the Select Board with Woodland Street, in this case, the only one that is pre-approved by MassDOT per Mr. Hearn's memo. I'll entertain a motion to provide such a vehicle exclusion on Woodland Street.
So I move to pursue a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion on Woodland Street.
Second.
So do I have a second? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that carries.
Just
Okay.
to mention, the pre-approved, what we have is, I believe what we have
Adequate.
matches all of the data points that we'll need to pursue it. So we still need approval.
Sure.
Understood. So in other words, it's not happening tomorrow.
Yes.
But when the rules come out, we'll announce that.
Yes.
But the board is empowering you to proceed under the understanding that we're in good standing with our application and
Excellent.
look forward to a favorable outcome.
And gentlemen, I just want you to know that the Traffic Advisory Committee has about 22 or 25 petitions before it. We were waiting for board discussion and board decision. This actually addresses many of the petitions that we have before us. So I think we're not only addressing the Lowland Industrial Park, although there were some similarities on who was on each call and who's petitioning. I think that this is great work for the Traffic Advisory Committee as well. So thank you all.
I do have one question here. As we do this particular thing, so like, what are our next steps? I mean, obviously we've looked at these things, but I think what we need to sort of evaluate is like, what do we, do we need to wait for special town meeting to get the data collection to be able to act in our next capacity, or are there other things that we can do? And I just sort of want to understand and
Right.
set expectations.
Well, sequentially, Ben, the next steps involve MassDOT. I think we needed the major site visit with the stakeholders involved and the legislators. We hope to have that within the next month or so. That's how we left it with them a couple of weeks ago. Following that, the next development will be special town meeting in December. We expect hopefully some favorable consideration to fund to study the surrounding streets in the Lowland Industrial Park in addition to South Street, and use that data for application of similar commercial vehicle exclusions with MassDOT. That might take some time.
Sure.
My best guess after speaking with them when they were with us is their work can pretty much be counted by weeks and months. So following some awarding of a contract, if it's voted on favorably in December, this is likely something that moves into the spring, early spring, I would think.
Okay.
Is it reasonable?
Yes.
For the remainder part of this play.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're keeping it on the radar, so we can kind of also, there's certainly some interest from the residents, so they understand what to expect, that we're not.
Yeah, it's kind of new ground for us. So some of this is guesswork.
Sure.
We are working with the state bureaucracy, so there's that. And then, but after that, there's then the implementation phase, which may very well include, and you brought up the point that we spent a fair amount of time talking to MassDOT about, is the intersection of Washington 16 and Whitney. That's going to be a project. And in order to execute the plan, and this is what Mr. Hafford was talking about, we have to be mindful through the traffic analysis that we're not creating problems elsewhere.
Right.
I mean,
No, absolutely. You don't want to play whack-a-mole.
I think reasonably we expect traffic to flow onto the state routes, make use of the state routes
Right.
safely, and live happily ever after. Right?
Oh yeah,
That's the plan, right?
that'd be the idea. But I just so basically we would take some action. We're hoping for favorable action at special town meeting to get the data collection and get the equipment we need to take additional data from the Traffic Advisory Committee, and then it's reasonable to expect there might be some follow-up in the spring, but probably the most likely the next action items would probably be taking place like at May town meeting, like for if we need to do studies or we need to do additional work or for design or anything like that.
I think number
Bylaw
11,
changes.
number 11 with the Safe Routes to School may have its own path, may or may not, depending on how that develops. But I will tell you that there's a Safe Routes to School forum the end of October that I'll be going to, and I'll be looking to hear what they have to say in terms of grant programs for things like this.
All right.
Awesome.
I
Thank you.
think we have addressed this sufficiently this evening, so we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, and that is warrants. And this goes to Mr. Ahern.
Nope, that's me.
His warrant.
Sorry, your warrants.
My warrant.
You're number 8.
So we have one warrant in front of us, so I'm going to make a motion to approve a warrant in the amount of $991,850.21. Of that, $146,716.23 is town payroll.
I'll take a motion to approve the warrant as read by the clerk.
So moved.
Actually made the motion, but so.
Oh, and I
All
second
right.
it.
Second it.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you.
I'll sign it. And we just have the one.
I thought there were two.
There's 2 pages. There's 2 copies of the same one.
Excellent. I should
You
have
might have
looked
been
at it.
thinking of the town clerk warrant.
That's right.
And don't
Lots
forget
of
the warrant
warrants.
that comes up under number 8, too.
Lots of warrants.
Warrants, we got warrants.
We got warrants.
Okay.
Warrants.
Public comment, Mr. Sparrow.
Yeah, I have 2 public comments. The first is starting on November 1st, 2020, there is no on-street parking between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. until March 31st, 2021.
Thank you.
So I just want to make that clear. That will be, I'm sure, posted prominently on the website as well, but just wanted to make that clear as part of this exercise. Public comment. The second one is fall curbside leaf pickup. E.L. Harvey will be picking up leaves at Curbside the week of November 30th, 2020. All leaves must be in compostable bags or loosened trash barrels. Plastic bags will not be accepted. All leaves must be at Curbside by 6 a.m. on your designated trash pickup day. We'll be saying this more, but we'll be continuing to remind people about this, but we're going to start the process now to make sure that people understand that fall curbside leaf pickup will be taking place the week of November 30th, 2020.
Thank you.
Tina.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have anything prepared, but I just feel like this past week has been one for the records. I want to acknowledge, I will not take a moment of silence. I think we are late in the evening, but I want to acknowledge the fact that in the United States we've passed 200,000 lives lost to COVID-19, and our President and First Lady are recovering from COVID-19. So I just want to acknowledge the seriousness of this pandemic in America and encourage again, like I did earlier, that we remain vigilant, that we wear face masks, that we wash our hands, that we keep our distance from one another, and we avoid large groups.
Thank you, Ms. Hunt. My only public comment is related to next week's meeting. Next week is a holiday. Monday is Columbus Day. We'll be not meeting. So we'll take the week off and follow up the week after that.
Excellent.
All right. Next item, comments from the town administrator.
So, number 1 was going to be Columbus Day. All set there. Number 2, the back steps of Town Hall, which many people are aware of, were ripped out by an accident, have been replaced. If you notice that there is no guardrail, that is still coming. It is being fabricated and will be put in. So that is an important access point to the back of the building. So we're glad that that's moved along. And again, that will be no cost to the town. That was the fault of the driver. Building inspector and zoning enforcement officer interviews have started, and we hope to move as quickly as possible, though we will make sure that we are getting somebody for the long term that we think is a good fit for the town. So we won't rush it, but it is starting, and you can expect in the coming few weeks that I'll be bringing at least a name or two forward to the select board. So we're excited about that. Obviously sad to lose Chris, as we've mentioned before, Chris Canny. You as a board and the finance committee have received the Q1 budget to actual update from the town accountant. This is an important process that S&P and others like to see to make sure that our important boards and committees are kept up to speed on the finances of the town. Obviously, this is a difficult financial year, so there are added components that you get a weekly update from the chief as it comes to Karazhak and other things of that nature. But the standard Q1 financial update is an important aspect as well, and so that is in your inboxes, and I will probably be going through to a certain extent with the finance committee tomorrow night on their meeting if they have any questions on that. And I could obviously answer any questions tonight as well. I think one thing I would point out is, generally speaking, a Q1 update does not have a ton of information. It's more to make sure we don't see any red flags. A couple things we are sort of watching would be our unemployment. As I think I mentioned last week, one of our concerns is that the state has removed our ability to contest fraudulent unemployment claims. and that is due to the workload that they're under. At the same point, it makes it very difficult for us to plan out our year. So it's a red flag that we're aware of, and obviously this board's aware of, and the Finance Committee is aware of, and is causing Mary Busquet quite a bit of issue. Mary and I did reach out to Rep. Dykema just to ask for any help in sort of moving the state back to a position where at the very least we can flag for them the claims that we know to be fraudulent. Other claims that we may disagree with, obviously, once they get up to speed on their workload would be helpful, but the fraudulent claims specifically, if we could get that under control, that would really help us, so we've gone through that. So if there were any other questions on the Q1 financial update, obviously, as we move into the end of the first half of the year, there's going to be a lot more financial information, and we can set up a time to sort of, spend a good chunk of time with the board going through where we are.
Travis, does that Q1 update include local receipts?
It does not. So one of the things that we're looking at right now, obviously the Treasurer Collector's Office does a great deal of HR, and that's been the primary focus of that office at the moment. Mm-hmm. And so we are, sort of catching up with revenues as they're coming in terms of the reporting. We're a little behind. And also, in terms of the tax levy not being set at this point because the tax rate has not been set. A Q2 financial update when it comes to revenues is really the point where we'd want to see that to begin with. But we can certainly track where our local receipts are coming in to make sure where they track to the previous year. We'd like to do that in the coming couple weeks.
Speaking of the tax rate, have you checked in with the assessors to see if they're on track for a tax rate hearing about a month from now or so?
I have an internal finance team meeting tomorrow, and Kathy will be with us. She is working very hard to stay on track, and if we think we are not going to, we will get that information to everybody as soon as possible.
That's outstanding. Any questions?
One last thing I would just point out, is I don't have it on the agenda tonight to vote, so the next time that we do meet, we'll probably be voting for a time to reopen the warrant now that the town meeting has moved. My thought process, just so everybody's aware, would be the final week of October to reopen the warrant, let everybody know. I know the CPC has met and taken some votes, but I think they've indicated if the warrant were open again that they would potentially take advantage of that, and I know some other people may as well. So right now the thought process would be to reopen the warrant the last week of October, but until you vote that, that's not final.
Okay.
And that's all I have for right now.
Any questions with the town administrator? Ben?
Nope.
Tina?
None, thank you.
Any on the Zoom call? All right, we're going to move on to the town meeting warrant development discussion.
Okay, and Chris or Justin, if you could put up that one pager again. I know everybody's sort of seen this now. It's the exact same thing from last week, so the date hasn't changed. This is just for anybody watching from home. Obviously, the information we'll go through here is going to be as much as you'd like to get into. What I've tried to do now is begin to put the language together by article, put together all of the backup information. Because we've changed the date, there are some things that maybe would have fallen off if we hadn't collected enough information. But I think now at this point, we can keep on our radar as we approach the December 5th date. So I would just highlight where Article 4 stands, and I'll go through these at a high level. You have the information. The information's also been shared with the Finance Committee from a previous meeting, as obviously nothing has significantly changed since the last time they got an update. So within Article 4, I'm looking at $1.1 million in capital projects. This is the standard annual capital article, which encompasses quite a bit of what I would refer to in previous towns as capital outlay. Included in that number is some things that fell off of the annual warrant that people felt could wait. I think that this is a good time to tackle them. Just for some comparison, at the special town meeting last year, 1.75-ish was approved in this article. We're looking at about 1.1 right now. So just the top items that have sort of been on our radar is the facility manager vehicle. This was put in place when that position was created. It fell off of the July town meeting because of the COVID. At this point, the COVID implications, not the COVID. I know that sounds a little ignorant. The facilities manager vehicle was part of the assumed creation of that position. So as of this moment, that individual is using his own personal vehicle and sort of charging us the IRS rate, which is fine as a short-term plan, but in the long term, I think, we definitely want to recognize that that individual needs a vehicle for that position as it was created and intended. That vehicle that's spec'd out here follows our green communities guidelines, and I have the quote and all that behind it. The steps and railing at 1750 Washington, this fell off of part of a larger scope there. The work that's being done at 1750 that was approved at the July town meeting was to fix the ADA compliant ramp in the front. So that work is actually being done by the facilities manager right now, or a contractor overseen by him. But the railing to the left of if you're looking at the building to the left going down to the lower lot, right now is blocked off by cones or orange sort of objects. Ideally we get that fixed. We have people use that. It's a liability at the moment the way it's situated. And that's $10,000. The town hall septic, this is a conversation that we've been going through. We have a little bit more clarity on the direction that we're going. We had a few plans. One included an easement on as you're looking at town hall on the left. Another option is pumping out to the back, and then we're also looking at an option to the right, although that gets a little dicey when it comes to the cemetery. So right now, we have a little bit more direction. We're going in a plan that I hope I'll be able to give you a sort of scope for and cost estimates. Right now, I have $150,000 as a placeholder for that. I think no matter which direction of those three we go in, I think the 150 covers it, and that's why the number is there, but also highlighted in yellow. Replacement of air packs and bottles is from the fire department. We don't have any information on a grant that's outstanding, but potentially that number could be beaten back a little bit if a grant were to come in. Ambulance tone voice pagers. This is an accompanying one to the previous year for $25,500. Public safety radio placeholder. This is that was put forward by the chief as they're going through the interoperability program. It's been highlighted that we may need to reinforce the tower that holds the equipment, and we are waiting for more information on that. So the December 5th date will allow us to collect that information, so I have the placeholder here. There are two requests from the highway, prioritize 1 and 2. The trackless mower is the number 1 priority. Chevy Silverado equipped is number 2. I thought, personally coming to town as a new person to this process with all of the equipment needs of the highway, I thought this was a very reasonable ask personally. And the trackless mower, again, is number 1 priority. We have 2 items under Article 4 that are related to the Green Communities Grant. One is the boiler replacement at the police station, and this board, I'm going to look for some direction from. The other item under green is for the school committee to be discussing. Essentially, they go through their evaluation and then they grant us money. The total cost of the boiler replacement at the police station is about $33,000. Then the money they gave us leaves a delta of $18,100. If we were to want to go ahead with that, we would need to come up with that $18,000. If we were to not, we would essentially be turning away that money. The school committee is looking at a similar instance where they got $50,000 for the high school field insulation. It's related to a project, the high school field house, regardless of whether or not the high school were to be replaced next year, or if that SOI were selected, the field house would live on in most plans, and so it may make sense to do that. But that is still for the school committee to decide, so I have that highlighted as well. We can certainly discuss those tonight, or we can discuss them in the future. I think the decision just needs to be made. Are we prepared to turn away the money on the police station boiler, or do we want to pony up to get that project done and essentially split the cost? And that's related, again, we can go into the detail of why that came out the way it did.
I'm inclined to leave it in for now, Travis.
Okay.
I would like to call attention to the school item. How did that item come to your attention?
So through the capital subcommittee of the finance committee, Keith Bidet and Ann Louise have been now active in that group. Keith had been at the last 2 meetings. Ann Louise just joined us for the last meeting. So he brought that to the attention, but again, it's within the same conversation as the police boiler. I personally had not been involved in the original application, so I didn't realize they were connected, but now it's essentially the exact same component, right? We have a certain amount that Green Communities is going to provide.
Mm-hmm.
If we'd like to pursue it, this is the match. So $50,000 was provided. The total cost estimate is about $90,000. And there are some questions when it comes to also the work and labor behind it that we also need to hash out, and that's why the school committee needs to vote on this if they'd like to proceed.
Yeah, I was going to point out, I'd like to entertain these items after the school committee's taken a vote, and then they follow the capital request policy that's been approved by the board.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate the updates and the intel you receive, but kindly keep them off here until we get that other official notice from the school committee, okay?
Okay. So 3 police vehicles is the essentially fleet replacement schedule. I have an inflation in here as the market has adjusted, and that information is provided as backup. And then there's 2 items that sort of also fell off the annual town meeting timeline. Senior Center interior improvements and library interior improvements. Both of these have sort of been vetted by the new facilities manager and feels that these are good projects to get more useful life out of those buildings. It's time for that work to be done, and actually this is a great time to do it, as those buildings are sort of have less people in them through COVID to get that work done without really impacting service levels.
I seem to think, I'm sorry to cut you off, I seem to think the senior center interior improvements has been accomplished, Ben. Don't you recall the finance committee talking about that?
So what
Has
was,
work concluded?
the only thing I remember, there were 2 parts to this effort. One was an immediate concern for, I think it was I don't remember the specific concern, but it was related to, I want to say it was a fire hazard or health there was some particular hazard. Yeah, it was the ceiling tiles needed to be replaced, and they were replaced, but there were other upgrades that needed to be done.
To the extent that there might be new items, but that 40 number looks a lot like the number we've been holding for a while.
Well, it was like
since about a year.
52 originally,
Yeah.
and so I think the ceiling was done, and then I think this was like cabinets, and then there's some other kitchen upgrades if I'm remembering.
I can provide
nature.
all the backup. So essentially, this is the number, understanding that there were things that were put into the FY21 budget, but then also through the process of going through the 1% budget to the 0% budget. This is essentially the amount that the facilities manager feels comfortable, gets work done that the COA is obviously in favor of doing, the senior center director is in favor of doing. But if this board doesn't want to put forward or there's further discussion, we can certainly have that.
No, I'll just get more detail.
Yep.
You know, one thing that occurred to me, and I think Ben would chime in here, is when we look at these items on any given list of capital, I'd like to see some references to whether or not they're in our CIP. More importantly, what's in the CIP that's not in the plan. What are we moving on from or deferring? The CIP is an important document. We need to be informed by it. I know there are some items on this list that are in the capital improvement plan, so if you can bring that around as maybe a footnote or some column
Absolutely.
that designates it, and just let us know you're pulling off $500,000 from the CIP, and our CIP said we were up for $750, and these are the items that are not in here. Here's the risk. I think that's part of the plan. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Ben.
Well, I think, we've had these discussions in the capital subcommittee, but one of the things that I'd like to include is some reporting along that line within this, and I'm not putting this on Travis to do. I just sort of think in general that we need to put this together to sort of understand what's in the plan, having what's there, what's been included, what has not been included, what is coming down the pipe, and there's certainly a little bit more clarity about funding and things like that that needs to be addressed to that point. So I think that is something that I agree with you, and I think it is something that should be part of the backup for the warrant in general, that we were talking about, more than just the projects that are in front of you for Article 4, but also what are the future projects and what are the other projects that we've left out and why.
Yep. So all of these, as I said, I think previously, the 5-year CIP has been updated by when I came in. I sort of spoke to each department head to update their list. That was a list that was created by the Collins Center. Ben Sparrow, in his time as the Finance Committee, held it, and now it's sort of under my possession. It's been updated. The next major update is going to be as James Keese gets more information from Dude Solutions, which is a process that's ongoing. Everything within Article 4 that I just discussed are things that are reflected in the 5-year CIP, and additionally, anything sort of in the coming articles that also have capital components as it relates to plans. are things that, again, the plan would go in the 5-year CIP. When we get information from the plan, that information would then be entered into the 5-year CIP. And so, right, to your point, Mr. Cronin, everything that was just discussed within Article 4 is within the 5-year capital plan. And the point that I made on the DPW vehicles is that the 5-year capital plan would call for quite a bit more vehicles to be replaced on the schedule of FY 21 and 22. And these two vehicles, I appreciate those department heads, Tom Smith and Sean Reese, sort of identifying their major needs in a year like this, and saying these are absolutely our needs. So everything on here is in the 5-year CIP is the short answer to that.
I got that, but what's not?
What's not being addressed that's in the 5-year? I understand. Yep, we can do that.
All right, cool. I think at this point, I'm fine. We've already reviewed the remaining articles. They're in some way, shape, or form in flux. We've deferred town meeting for a couple of months. I think we can put off going through the rest of them this evening, Travis, if that's okay with you, unless the board has any concerns about that.
I just have I wanted to just dive in on something in terms of the article for the water main replacement for
Water system
Mudville.
modernization.
No,
Oh, no.
where is it?
Article 10, Winter Street.
Nope.
7.
Yep. Yes.
Yep.
Just going to dive in there for a minute. This is about 1.5 to 2 miles worth of sidewalk and road surface and drainage improvements. Is that right? It includes drainage?
It does.
Okay. So my point, coming back to what we talked about last week, and maybe I'm poking a bear here, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. We've got $383,000 here for the work to install sidewalks, to address drainage, and to repave roadways on an over 1.5 mile stretch. I see this and I think Winter Street. I think that this becomes somewhat of a reference point for cost. I get that it's not an estimate.
It is not. So if you look at the sheet that I've included here
Yeah.
behind it, so
Yeah, I was
the
going through
total
some of this
project is
detail.
the 3 point. Okay, so you meant the 3.3, not the 353,000.
I'm looking at this right here, the drainage and roadway
Okay,
improvements.
okay, great. Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
So I'm just going through that, and I'm just wondering, I'm drawing, probably shouldn't, but I'm drawing connections. And I'm seeing prices here, and so I'm just putting that out there. This is great, though. This level of detail is great. It's very helpful to see this, because I want to just dig in on one more item here. If you go down about 3/4 of the way to the bottom of this list, you'll see it's number 815.99, repair of traffic control signal loops, detectors, and reactivation. So way back when, we had advice from McMahon to consider a video detection system instead of a in-the-ground loop detector. I don't know if it's appropriate to ask that question now, if they all need to be done at the same time. Like, why would you just do one intersection and not Hollis and not Central Street at the same time? But if it is an option to do one intersection, that was a recommendation by McMahon, is that instead of doing an in-the-ground loop detection system, you do a video loop detection system. Do I have that right, Chief Cassidy? Maybe you remember that. So I think it's just worth having the conversation. I don't know the right answer.
Okay.
It is great to see this
I can
detail.
absolutely follow up.
Okay, thank you.
815.9.
Yeah.
Great.
Any more comments, Ben, Tina, on the warrant, such as it is?
There was somebody from the call.
Can't hear you.
There was someone from the call who had a question when you're ready.
Who would that be?
Susan Shaw.
Susan, do you have a question about the warrant for us this evening?
No. Chris is shaking his head. And so, if you don't mind, I would just ask. So essentially, what we have here, I've begun to construct all of the language. If there's any questions from the board going forward, just so that we're sort of working on this, and at the next time that you feel comfortable putting forward any warrant articles that you feel comfortable sort of moving out of your hands, that we vote those and we pass them forward, and maybe do that in sort of buckets of a number of them.
I'd like to tackle them probably towards the end of October and start looking at them in batches then. We've got the time, and gives the warrant some time to breathe.
And could I just make one comment about Article 9, which is the water system modernization plan?
Please, go right ahead.
So I had a conversation with Sean today, and we actually spoke to the the individual who's putting together the studies. Erica, yes. If I just said Erica, that would be. So we talked about the scope of the existing studies and if any language needed to change to include things like valves, looping, and things like that for the water main. I don't remember the exact phrasing. Hold on, I can get it for you. But the basically the water main replacement study. So we're going to just slightly adjust a little bit of language in there. It's not going to be a major. It's not going to require any cost differences, but just to make sure that that includes the scope that is included in the scope to discuss those elements.
You're talking about on the article?
The actual study.
Oh, okay.
We're talking about the actual study.
Yeah.
So we discussed those pieces, and then we also talked about, with reference to the water supply article, one of the things that has come up a couple of times is the possibility of looking for new wells, and that was not included in the actual language of the existing study. But what we were at requesting is to include some language that could be included if necessary, if you will. So basically what it would do is they would look at a water supply study, and then if warranted, then they would extend it to include looking for possibly new wells. So that would increase that particular study by $20,000 to include that part of the scope. But that's just to make sure that we have that available if that is the direction that needs to be gone with the water supply study.
So right now, and just for clarity, because on here it's all Article 9, right? So the water system modernization plan is designed to touch on the source development and source study.
Yes.
One would be 15,000 estimate, one would be 20,000 estimate, and then for the other plan, which includes exercising valves, all those things, looping the system, doing all that design, that's 40,000. So the total is 75,000.
Correct.
Is a number that I have in here.
Correct.
And that was a direction I just wanted to make sure we have the right number.
75,000. I'm telling you that basically it doesn't have to be a placeholder. It can be.
Okay.
That's the expectation.
Excellent.
Of those studies.
Great. And I would just read this language, and if you disagree with anything I have here, just let me know.
Okay.
And again, if the board is prepared the next time we meet to vote a number of articles and everybody's comfortable with that one or any of the other ones, we can sort of approve them and let the Finance Committee know that they've been approved by the Select Board.
Very good. Any further discussion on the warrant? Good, Tina? All right. Board business. We're in the meeting minutes of August 31st, 2020. I'll accept the motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. We have a proposed one-day all-alcoholic beverage license for a wedding October 8th, 2020 at the Holliston Historical Society from 3:30 to 9:30 p.m. Do we have this license?
Yes.
Chief, we had some public comment about a public event at that facility. I believe you've counseled with them, have you not?
Oh, yes.
When it comes to weddings and gatherings like that, you're privy to what they're doing, I presume, are you not?
They've asked for clarification, especially in light of the steps that have been changing.
Right.
They had a large reception that was requested, and I had to tell them they couldn't because we were still under the previous step.
Okay.
So they're in pretty close contact.
So this particular event is in compliance with our current gathering restrictions? Okay,
Right.
gotcha. I'll entertain a motion to approve the one-day all-alcoholic beverage license for the event held at the Holliston Historical Society on October 8th, 2020, from 3:30 to 9:30.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. The Holliston Amended Aggregation Plan. Travis, do you want to talk about this?
So the town previously approved the aggregation plan where residents can opt in. This is a change that has been put forth by Colonial. What they're essentially looking for is for the town to opt in, at which point the Energy Assistance Customers, EAC as defined under Eversource, would receive a benefit of slightly lower rates I went back and forth on this quite a bit. Sustainability coordinator sat in on the call. I provided you with sort of the questions and answers that we received. There's essentially no financial commitment to the town. It's one of those things where I just needed to kick all the tires because it sounded too good to be true. But at the end of the day, it's something that they sort of get pushed into by the state in a number of areas. And what we're doing by amending our aggregation plan is just providing this benefit to approximately 156 customer accounts as classified under Eversource as energy assistance customers. So if you were to take the vote to approve the income, the low income language, it would just be a benefit to those individuals.
I'll entertain a motion to adopt the low-income language for the Holliston amended aggregation plan through Colonial.
So moved.
Have a second.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Other business, Mr. Sparrow.
I have nothing at this time.
Very good. Ms. Hyde.
Yeah, I just wanted to update this board that the Board of Health on their meeting on Tuesday discussed Covanta and some of the truck traffic concerns that, again, we've seen through the Traffic Advisory Committee, that we've heard a little bit through the Lowland Industrial Park Forum and so on. So I appreciate the Board of Health taking it up. They had a very good, thorough discussion. They are looking for more information, but as I interpreted the comments from that meeting, they are considering inviting Covanta to come to a board meeting to kind of hear what these issues are and to help problem solve with the Board of Health. They are, by all accounts, a very responsible business in the town, and so there's good faith that they will take these issues, whatever ends up being presented to them, seriously and work to find solutions. So again, wanted to thank the Board of Health for the discussion. They're meeting again tomorrow night. It's on their agenda. I will attend that meeting with a little bit more detail that they were looking for, and I will be there to support the Board of Health's consideration of inviting Covanta to come before them to hear the concerns that residents have brought up, and we ourselves maybe have identified a little bit in terms of heavy truck traffic. I'm particularly talking about the August 7th state police enforcement action that was taken, where they pulled off heavy vehicles, overweight vehicles, they issued fines and so on. I just think that that's a piece of communication that needs to be elevated and shared with Covanta. And there's some other things too, but anyway, that's happening tomorrow night, that I will attend their meeting, and that's the direction I hope we're going to.
Thanks, Tim. Travis, you and I talked earlier today about monitoring the Board of Health regarding Halloween. I don't know if you want to share any updates on that, because we won't be meeting next week and the end of the month is coming, so anything to share?
I think they said on, oh, I'm sorry, you're not talking.
No, if you want to, I was going to loop in the chief as well. I think they did discuss it last Tuesday.
I think they were waiting, I'm sorry, till tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yeah. So they do have a meeting tomorrow night. I think they took advantage of the fact that they were going to have meetings in quick succession to say that they'll update after tomorrow night. I know that they've been monitoring what the CDC put out, what the state has now put out, and that tomorrow night, hopefully some directive will be given to the town. Is there anything I missed there, Chief?
Such as it is.
Spot on.
Okay, did you have something else?
I do have one thing. So this is just a bit of housekeeping, nothing controversial, so I'll do it here. The healthcare advisor that the town has hired to sort of look at the best plan moving forward for the town, work with the employees in the town to sort of look at our healthcare provider, has decided that one such quote they like to get is from Maya. Maya we use for other insurance, not health insurance. And Maya's process is that the select board needs to vote to approve that our consultant can request a quote. And so I'm asking you to do that. Obviously, there is no obligation on behalf of the board to do anything once the quote is received. We're looking for information, but this is their process. They'd like to see a vote from you. So you'd be making a motion to request a quote from Maya on behalf of the town.
I'll entertain a motion to allow the town administrator to receive a quote from Maya as described.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
You've got that. Hearing no other business this evening, we are now going to adjourn to executive session and will not be returning to regular session. We'll be discussing non-union personnel, reason number 2, under the public meeting law. I'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Ms. Hine
Aye.
by name, please.
Tina Hine, aye.
Ben.
Aye.
John Cronin, aye. We are now going to enter executive session this evening. That concludes our public-facing part of this discussion. Thanks so much, Holliston, for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Enjoy your evening.